Before we start, drop a like because it helps this video reach more City fans, and check right now that you're subscribed. Subscribing guarantees you won't miss any updates when things truly heat up, and today the topic is at maximum level, the kind that can change the direction of an entire season. In the last few hours, the atmosphere around Manchester City has felt different. It's not just the normal pressure of a team still alive in every competition. It's something else. It's the increasingly present feeling that we might be watching the final chapters of an era that redefined the club, and on top of that, changed English football for years. Because even though the ball is still rolling and the team is still fighting for everything, the reading is growing inside and out that Pep Guardiola could be approaching the moment to close the cycle at the Etihad. And here comes the point that splits the fan base. On one hand, there's the contract. Pep signed a recent 2-year renewal, which on paper keeps him in the job until the end of 2026-27. If he saw that whole period through, it would be a colossal ending. A spell stretching to around 11 seasons in Manchester, something unthinkable when he arrived in 2016, and something extremely rare in modern football, especially at the level of scrutiny and intensity of the Premier League. But football isn't just paper. The contract says one thing. Emotional and mental reality says another. And that's exactly where the conversation gets serious, because Guardiola himself has signaled more than once at different moments that when he decides to stop at City, it wouldn't be a simple case of switching clubs the next day. The idea would be to breathe, step out of the current, spend some time away from the center of the storm, a real break, maybe even a complete stop for a period. And when a manager of that stature speaks like that so naturally, the entire club has to be ready for the day he actually puts that decision into practice. And this can't be treated like soap opera drama, because the weight is real. Since 2016, City haven't just won. City imposed a standard, 6 Premier League titles, the Champions League that was the missing obsession, and a collection of trophies that became part of everyday life. But it wasn't just winning. It was winning with an identity that forced everyone else to adapt. It changed how teams defend, how they press, how they play out, how they build squads, how they plan seasons. The whole league had to look at City and ask, how do we reach that level? And now, at the exact moment this discussion appears, the team is alive and competitive again in the way fans recognize. In the Premier League, the race is tight, with Arsenal ahead by the smallest margin and City right behind, ready to take advantage of any slip in this period where the calendar turns into a survival test. And in the Champions League, after a statement result away from home against Real Madrid, the environment is starting to smell like a big campaign again. The kind that doesn't end at "it was nice, but we went out early." The kind that really makes Europe feel it again. That's what makes everything more intense. Because when the team is fragile, talk about the future becomes an escape. But when the team is strong, talk about the future becomes threat and motivation at the same time. Threat because the fan thinks, not now. Motivation because if there's even the smallest chance it's the last year, nobody wants a common ending. Everyone wants it to be cinematic. But behind the scenes, there's no room for romance. There's planning. And the impression that's been gaining strength is that people close to the situation believe the most likely timing, if it happens, would be next European summer. It's not a certainty, it's not an announcement, it's nothing official, but it's that accumulation of signals. Internal conversations, quiet preparation, and the kind of phrase that circulates when a giant club starts organizing for a what if. And then the question appears that scares people. And at the same time makes sense. Who would be in line to take over a dressing room that has been shaped by Pep Guardiola for so many years? One name that comes up often in this kind of conversation is Enzo Maresca, now at Chelsea. And it's not because someone is trying to invent a link out of nowhere. He knows the house. He's worked within City's environment. He's been close to the ideas and the method, and he has real connections with people who move in those circles. On top of that, there's the most dangerous factor in narrative terms. His curve of development draws attention. When a manager starts showing rapid growth and at the same time has a history linked to the club, the name becomes a natural candidate on any succession list, even if nobody says it out loud. But pay attention. That doesn't mean there's a negotiation, or that Chelsea would be ready to lose their manager, or that City have chosen anyone. It means, in practice, that City are at the stage where they have to map possibilities, because a club of this size can't wait for the day of an announcement to start thinking about the day after, especially when it's about replacing someone who wasn't just a manager, but the center of the entire project. And that's where a key figure in this story comes in. One that helps explain why this isn't just gossip. The director of football, Hugo Viana. When a club changes or strengthens the leadership of its football department, that kind of movement often comes with scenario planning. Not because someone already knows what will happen, but because someone has to be ready for any outcome. If Pep decides to stay, that's one plan. If Pep decides to leave, that's another. And both plans have to be drawn up before the chaos. And looking at this season, you can see why City feel they're in a sort of controlled transition. There were exits of veterans, the arrival of younger names, and a clear effort to renew energy without losing identity. As if the club is, at the same time, trying to keep the competitive machine running in the present and preparing the gears for the future, with or without changes on the touchline. The most symbolic point is this. Pep has always been a manager who demands the club think the way he thinks. That's powerful, but it also creates dependency. So when the possibility of the end of a cycle emerges, City can't simply change managers. They have to decide whether they'll look for someone who preserves the same logic or whether they'll accept a change of route, even if it's gentle. And that's a decision that affects everything. Recruitment, squad building, playing style, dressing room hierarchy, and even the way the fan base interprets every step. And as if that weren't heavy enough, there's an extra element hanging over the club. Expectations around definitions linked to the financial case in the Premier League. Regardless of opinion, the impact of any outcome is enormous, and that also influences planning, external noise, pressure, and even how much someone wants to remain at the center of the stage. When the environment becomes saturated, even someone who loves winning starts considering the cost of staying. That's why this moment is so delicate, because on the pitch, City are on track to fight for titles. Off the pitch, the club has to prepare for the kind of change that doesn't happen every season. And it's in that crossroads that the story starts to feel like now or never. And there's one more detail the fan needs to keep in mind. If the players sense there's any real chance it could be the final chapter, behavior changes. It changes in training. It changes in how they approach big matches. It changes the hunger. Nobody wants to be remembered as the squad that let an era end in silence. And at the same time, nobody wants to carry the weight of, we lost the chance to give him the farewell he deserved. So I'll ask you directly, do you feel this is just backstage noise? Or do you think there's a genuinely concrete possibility that Pep ends it before the contract runs out, already next European summer? If you answered that, it feels like more than noise. You're not alone. When this kind of conversation starts appearing in different layers of the club at the same time, the strongest signal isn't one loose phrase here and another there, it's behavior. It's the way City start moving as a precaution, even without publicly breaking anything. Because one thing is respecting the contract, another is living as if it's an absolute guarantee. And in football, almost nothing is an absolute guarantee. That's why, while the fan base is still digesting the simple possibility of an early goodbye, the club is already acting like it needs to protect the future. And protecting the future, in City's case, runs through two connected fronts: succession on the touchline and renewal of pieces in the squad. If the Pep era continues, great. These pieces strengthen the machine. If the Pep era ends, these pieces help make the transition less traumatic, because the team doesn't enter a change carrying, at the same time, a drop in performance and a lack of options. And then comes the most practical aspect of this scenario. As much as the fans' focus is on the top of the table and the Champions League, the football department has to be alert to everything that could blow up in 6 months, a year, 2 years. And there are clear signs that City are looking ahead, especially in defense. One name that has been circulating is a very young defender, 17 years old, called Ornstein. The point here isn't to treat this like a done deal, because it isn't. The point is what kind of profile this sort of monitoring reveals. When City track a player of that age closely, there are usually two ideas behind it: elite potential and tactical fit. And in his case, what stands out is versatility, the ability to operate in more than one role across the defensive line, including occupying wider spaces when the match demands it. And if there's one characteristic that has always been valuable at City, it's exactly that. People who understand different tasks and don't get lost when the team's shape changes during a match. This makes even more sense when you look at what could happen with important center-back options. There's uncertainty about John Stone's future and also about Nathan Ake's situation. In one scenario, the issue could be contract and cycle. In another, it could be the search for more minutes in a year that leads into a World Cup. And when you add that kind of doubt to the natural wear and tear of long seasons, the conclusion becomes inevitable. City need to make sure they won't be caught off guard. At the same time, the squad keeps reorganizing and some partnerships look more and more like the team's base. The feeling is that certain names are already consolidating as pillars, and the club wants to build around them a stable structure with planned replacement rather than improvised replacement. And then the typical strategy appears. Identify a talent early, track closely, and only accelerate when the right window arrives and the contractual situation allows it. As if that still weren't enough, there's a second discussion that touches the heart of the project: attacking output outside the center forward. Because City remain competitive, keep creating, keep controlling matches, but there's a diagnosis that has hovered around the club for a while and becomes clearer in tight games. You can't always rely on one man as the main source of goals. The team needs, in certain moments, players who decide from the flanks, who solve it when the opponent blocks the middle, who turn half a chance into a goal, who are a constant threat without the game needing to be perfect. And this is exactly where the name Antoine Semenyo comes in more strongly and starts to make sense as a story that won't die. He's viewed as a winger with more direct, more physical, more objective traits, someone who doesn't only offer pretty dribbles and possession retention, but attacks the box, shoots, buys duels, speeds the game up. And that kind of profile, when it enters a team that already has control and build-up, can become the weapon that unbalances top-level matches. What makes this story more relevant is the perception that the desire inside City wouldn't be just liking the player. There are reports that the admiration would come from Guardiola himself, as if the manager sees in him exactly the antidote for certain specific matches. And when a manager of that stature points to a need, the club usually takes it more seriously, because it's not only the scouting list, it's a demand born from reading the pitch, from frustration in big games, from details the fan feels, but the manager lives from the inside. Of course, that doesn't mean it's simple. Bournemouth, for example, have no reason to make an exit easy in the middle of the season, and when a mid-table club has their player performing, the natural goal is to hold on until the end of the cycle and, if they sell high, with time to plan. That's why people talk about high fees. And that's also why the chance of an immediate negotiation tends to be treated with caution. City aren't known for panicking in January. City usually wait for the right moment or only act if an opportunity appears that can't be ignored. And there's another factor that spices it up: competition. This isn't the kind of player who goes unnoticed. Big clubs are watching, and when several giants look at the same target, it becomes either an auction or a battle of projects. In those moments, it's not only money that matters, it's the sporting pathway, the promised role, the manager's idea, and even what the player imagines for himself in terms of protagonism. From the player's side, the described stance is calm. He knows there's interest, and he knows the topic can grow, but he stays focused on playing, maintaining his level, not becoming hostage to the market. That matters because it avoids internal noise and, at the same time, keeps the door open for a bigger decision to be taken calmly in the European summer when everything tends to fit better. Calendar, replacement, the selling club's planning, and time for City to integrate someone new without breaking the dressing room dynamics. And in the middle of all this, City's on-pitch moment works almost like fuel for these movements. When the team hits form, every decision feels more urgent, because the club sees a real chance to win big things, and at the same time understands that any detail can separate a title from frustration. The season reaches that stretch where a small improvement in the squad, or a more efficient fit on the flanks, can be the difference between dominating and merely competing. That's why what looks like a collection of disconnected stories actually fits into the same picture. City are preparing for every possible door. If Pep stays, they need new tools to keep winning and avoid becoming predictable. If Pep leaves, they need the squad's base to be strong enough not to depend on an immediate rebuild. And if there are changes in defense, they need monitored youth and a pathway designed for replacements. In the end, the question that remains for the fan is simple but heavy. Would you rather City lean more and more into very young, moldable, versatile talents, or do you want ready-made names with immediate impact, even if they cost more, and arrive demanding a starring role? And on the other side, do you think a more direct, more goal-scoring winger from the flanks is really the missing piece for City to turn control into wins in the toughest matches? If this content helped you understand better what's happening, drop a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next updates. Because when this kind of topic starts boiling, any detail can change everything from 1 hour to the next.